Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today I have Exile Wargaming with me, a Harlequin enthusiast and very good player that has his own Harlequin-based channel on YouTube. How you doing today, Exile?
Not too bad, man. How are you?
I'm pretty good, man. Pretty good. So, recently, you kind of uploaded a video about Harlequins versus Druhkari, and I thought this would be a great chance to kind of talk about how Harlequins run as an army and some of the positioning that you need to, kind of use against these more fast, aggressive armies. And, I thought who better to speak to about this than a Harlequin player, because of course Harlequins are like, you know, very at the cusp of like needing to be perfect, right? With their positioning. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about that. First of all, how did you find the matchup against the Dark Eldar?
Overall in Pariah Nexus, most of the matchups I've been playing against have been against hyper aggressive armies. A lot of combat, a lot of melee, a lot of tough units. I played against Blood Angels a bunch of times, three of them in a row. Played against Custodes. And then, recently I played against Druhkari, which was kind of a different style of aggression than some of the others. I found that Druhkari specifically led to something a little bit different. I mean, it's probably the closest thing to a mirror match that I've played since I really just started focusing on Harlequins. The similarities between the two armies are astonishing.
Yeah, and I've actually, weirdly enough, noticed that they are very similar as well when I started playing a little bit of Druhkari on Tabletop Simulator in the beginning of the, Pariah Nexus expansion. They're very similar. Like, it's scary.
Yeah, unit for unit, package for package, abilities. Both armies, whether it's Harlequins or Druhkari, can kind of recreate each other's success. That's really a lot about what my video was about. I know a lot of people are playing Druhkari right now, or had armies, or maybe they're picking them up right now. But you're finding Druhkari, the Sky Splinter Assault, at the top tables in a lot of tournaments. I think they just placed first in three of them this past weekend. So yeah, they're definitely in the winner's circle. They're a really, really good army, and I think as Harlequins or players thinking to get into a Harlequin more specific army, they can take a few keys from Druhkari and end up doing very, very well.
I absolutely agree. Now, let me ask you this. This is a little bit of a deeper question, and I think you probably have a lot more insight into it than I do. The Drukhari are one of the best factions right now as far as Pariah Nexus goes, right? And I mean, I know there
I
was a
believe so.
recent FAQ covering, skimmers also have to pay the -2 to their, to pivot and stuff like that. But the Drukhari kind of made out a little bit because they still get extra movement from their pivoting because their raiders are so weirdly shaped, even with the -2. But having said that, what do you think makes it, or let me put it this way, what do you think makes Drukhari so competitive, whereas we haven't really seen a lot of Harlequin-based armies, kind of win big events or, be on top tables. And I don't think that Harlequins are any worse than the Drukhari, but why do you think that is? Is it just because people haven't recognized it yet?
I really do think so. I think when you're looking specifically at the data sheets, and then you compare them to the Harlequin data sheets in specific phases of the game, it seems like Drukhari's a clear-cut winner. So, like Incubi, for example, they're strength 4, -2 AP, 2 damage apiece. They get 3 attacks apiece. You can use power from pain and reroll all their hits. And then with the Archon, if you're also using the power from pain dice, if they're empowered, they can reroll all their wounds. So like a 10-man squad of Incubi, for example, puts out 30 attacks, rerolling all of its hits. It ends up hitting like 25 of them. Then they're wounding at +1 to wound if they're getting out of a vehicle like a raider. And they're pretty much, wiping out everything that they see. So yeah, on paper, you look and go, that unit is absolutely incredible for, 225 points. You can do whatever you want to do. But Harlequins, on the other hand, can honestly put out, and the math proves this, averages, whatever it may be, just as much damage or at least kill equivalent units, right? 5-man Terminator squads, 10-man Marine squads for a lower cost a lot of the times, but over multiple phases. So yeah, the Harlequins don't have 2 damage weapons. That's the one thing that's kind of upsetting about the whole codex or index. But they do get devastating wounds. They do get +1 to wound on the charge. They can also get rerolls to wound getting out of a falcon. And when you start putting these whole packages together, fusion pistols, grenades, +1 to wound, rerolling wounds, then the fire from something like falcon, and turns out point for point, we're doing just as much damage to the same units. And I think people early on in the edition looked at Harlequins compared to everything else that Aeldari had, all the ridiculous shenanigans when D cannons were 80 points and Wraith Guard can shoot at anything in the universe. And the Harlequins got kind of pushed to the side. And I don't think people have just picked back up on how efficient they are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing is, if you guys are, wondering how Harlequins with a Falcon is comparable to 10 Incubi and a Raider with the Sky Splinter Assault, I think the pistols play a big part of it, right? Because you can take 2 per 5-man, and then you can also take 1 on the Troop Master.
Yep.
And the Troop Master has a little ability where he can change a Fate dice from his attacks to a 6, right? So that can guarantee some, guaranteed damage with the fusion pistol. And also the other 2 fusion pistols are getting the Eldar rerolls as well from the detachment bonus. So that's pretty much 3 Space Marines dead just from shooting. And we're not even accounting for the Neuro Disruptors and the Shuriken pistols, which, well, probably won't do anything.
Yeah.
But,
Well,
still.
Yeah, in one of the most important things that I think everyone looks over, because a lot of Eldari players are fire and fading every turn, or they're using a lot of command points. So they're not using something like grenades. All the Harlequin troops, all the troop masters, everything has grenades. So I just use that as an aggressive piece to each one of my armies, or every turn pretty much I'm throwing grenades, and that turns into another dead, character. If we're going into Terminators, between the 3 fusion pistols and the grenades, we're bringing down on average at least 2 of them. If the dice curves our way, we're bringing down 3 of them. Then we're charging, getting rerolls, and that's at minimum, not at minimum, on average, about another 5 to 6 devastating wounds before they have to make any saves. 5 dead Terminators, right, for 1 CP, before accounting for the Falcon shooting or anything like that. So it ends up being a lot more than what people expect. It's just little things that continually add up.
Yeah. And I think that's why the Harlequins are so powerful, is because they have more than just their melee profile would suggest. For sure.
Yeah, and every unit is hyper versatile. I've probably fired more fusion pistols, I will say, than almost anyone playing 40K in the past 6 months. My whole army is based on, multiple units of troops shooting fusion pistols and throwing grenades. And it works very, very well. You don't have to play like a dishonest game. You don't have to use, bizarre like pivot rules to catch an edge or anything. You could just go out there and play an honest game, and do pretty well with Harlequins, as long as you understand the matchup and what you need to do into specific armies. And I think that's kind of how we got to where we are, today, on how to handle aggressive armies. More specifically, you had a couple games recently against some aggressive armies. You just had a game against Blood Angels. I had a bunch of games against them and Custodes. And I feel like if you just do the right things, the sky's the limit for Druhkari or, Aeldari or Harlequins right now. We have all the tools, and our codexes are so vast with so many options. There's no reason why, once we dial it in, we are not at the top of the game. I really believe that, as long as, you dial it in.
Absolutely. And, even before Pariah Nexus, we were seeing some, pretty good success with some Harlequin type armies. So I think you're right. I think people just haven't dialed it in yet. People haven't realized it. And another thing to note is that, a lot of, tournament style Aeldari players are running a very similar list to what they always run. That's what they've run in so many events. That's what they're used to. That's what they're practiced with. And that's what they're comfortable with. And I think
Yeah,
that's a big reason why you see, why are experienced Eldari players running basically the same thing as always, because that's what they're comfortable with. That's what they've been winning games with in tournaments. That simple.
yeah. I mean, right now, I mean, even you'll still see some Wraithguard around. Most lists have Avatar with the Farseer. Most lists are running 3 units of Warp Spiders still. And I feel like people may just be stuck in that mindset. Now, those units are incredible, right? But there's other ways to win too. There's a ton of armies, there's a ton of factions in the game that are winning without Warp Spiders. And I think we would do well if we started exploring some of those. It might make the game a little bit more fun too.
Absolutely. And the other point that you make that I think is really important when going against aggressive style combat armies is you have to be able to kind of deploy aggressively and be aggressive in position. And can you speak a little bit to that and maybe how, aggressive style play really helps you against those kind of assault-based armies?
Yeah, actually, so this started. I was in a Discord. We talked to some people, and the specific words that were said was that there's nothing in Harlequins that keeps your opponent from just pushing everything into your deployment zone and tabling you in a turn or two. The thought is, they cannot withstand the attack. And on its face, yeah, if you're huddled up in your deployment zone, yeah, that's probably true. But the same thing goes for Druhkari or Imperial Guard or Gene Stealer cults or any of those other types of armies. So what I kind of set out to do is just get a recreatable, consistent action plan that I could adapt to every single game, and really just kind of came up with these kind of principles to make sure that we're kind of dealing in it. So one of the biggest things is really the top 3 that you see on the screen right now, and that is creating space, not being afraid to be selectively aggressive, and not deploying and hiding in the back of your deployment zone. Is you found playing against Blood Angels, as I've found these hyper aggressive armies with a ton of mobility. It's important to dictate the fight where you want to fight. And we'll get into some examples on what I mean by like creating space. But a lot of it as well comes to just deploying efficiently. So your units are in range of reasonable charges. And in Harlequin's case, they're fusion pistols, but also allowing our fights first units to protect the rest of our army by kind of setting traps with heroic intervention. It's really just about making your opponent have to make a lot of tough decisions. Do they want to wipe out one of your units and expose one of their expensive units to get wiped out the turn after for something like, 2 or 3 points in secondaries? Or do they want to hold back and then risk us charging them the following turn? So it's about creating scenarios that make it difficult for your opponent to navigate the game. Indirect is also a really, really great option. D cannons, specifically in Harlequins, I love their ability to give -1 to hit to any of the opposing, units. Is really good, but more so, it allows you to tear down some units and debuff them while they're staging on those first couple turns, without you having to expose anything yourself. Now, they did take a nerf. So indirect always hits on a 4+ now, so they're no longer getting that 3+ D cannon shot. But with the rerolls, with blast, it hasn't really been an issue. And it's the threat of D cannons more often than anything else, right? People will play around D cannons, whether they think they're going to hit them or not, which again allows you to dictate the fight where you want to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was going to say actually too, is that, we've seen competitive Eldar lists still bring D cannons, and that must mean that they're still pretty good, They're still a pretty good platform. They are very fragile. I personally have gonna, kind of gotten away from them because I'm more of a Falcon man and, that's how I'm kind of looking at it. But if you're bringing both to the table, D cannons are a very good tool, for indirect fire. We really don't have that much really good indirect fire, and D cannons are still probably up there with, being able to threaten not only infantry, like you said, but also tough targets, right? Like no one's going to want to move their Land Raider within range of 3D cannons, because that's
No.
going to be gone.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you miss all your shots, you know in the beginning of the game that your opponent is going to have their Land Raider deployed towards the back of their deployment zone or in strategic reserve because they can't risk just losing it in one turn to D cannons.
Right.
That's what it does. So when I played against like Blood Angels, right, I have my D cannons positioned. And then my opponent, who would have loved to place his unit of Death Company right on the line, ended up having to put them a couple inches back, right? So that if I did get the first turn, I didn't wipe out, half of his unit. It makes a big difference, especially when you're getting into like staging or like a turn one charge, right? Those couple inches back now move it from like an 8-inch charge to a 10-inch, and then we have Phantasm, and I can scoot back the last couple inches. Just the D cannons being there, I mean, it changes the game and how your opponent has to play. I think that's the case for a lot of indirect, but D cannons themselves are pretty dirty.
Yeah, I think they're probably one of the scariest indirect weapons in the game, honestly. Because if you look at it, a lot of indirect weapons, like if you look at Imperial Guard, their indirect fire is really good against infantry, primarily. So you also have on here Night Spinners. Now I kind of want to talk about Night Spinners a little bit because, they've been something that I've kind of mentioned at the very beginning of Pariah Nexus. I thought that Night Spinners might have a place in competitive lists. We really haven't seen them in competitive lists, but what is your thought on Night Spinners in general?
So in general, I think their profile, their abilities, everything are awesome. I think they're what, over 200 points now? Is it like
Yes.
210?
Yeah, 210 points.
It's kind of expensive. Now, if you still have like, a Farseer to guide it and things like that, yeah, I think the Night Spinner is fine. Twin Link Dev Wounds is always a really good thing, especially against like Marine profiles. Um, the the only issue right now would just be their points cost. But otherwise, I think Night Spinners are perfectly positioned to do really well, especially with the bizarre angles on the new terrain. It's making it difficult for some vehicles on some maps to really, get into space. That's why we're not seeing a ton of fire prisms either. Or on like the WTC side of things, fire prisms are just difficult, right?
Right.
But Night Spinners being able to just fire indirect it seems awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. Um, you know, you see a lot of trash holding home field objectives right now. People using scouts or intercessors or voids men at arms and stuff like that. And the Night Spinner, essentially, if it kills that home field unit, it's like they killed two units because now your opponent has to pull something else back to gain their points for that game. So it
Right.
is hyper efficient in that regard. I just don't know. I haven't got enough games in with them um, on how they would shape up right now. But on paper, they seem like they'd be pretty damn good.
Yeah, I think my only issue with them is the cost at the moment. I think the rules nerf that they took at the very beginning, well, not the very beginning, but back whenever they took that, rules nerf to basically make it the same thing as the Basilisk, except it can still target anything. It's not just limited to infantry, which is awesome. You can still slow down a vehicle, slow down a monster, whatever you need there. Mounted unit also, like
Mhm.
Thunderwolf Cavalry, for example.
Very good against
Yeah,
Thunderwolves and Blood Angels and Jump Pack. Yeah, it's very good into that.
absolutely. I mean, my thing about it is 210 points, but if you are going against one of those hyper aggressive Space Wolf or Blood Angels armies with a big unit of jump pack infantry, maybe they're running Stormlands, or maybe they're just you know Space Wolves with really fast, they get the first turn. Night Spinners could really be helpful in those matchups. If you take a unit out of the game for a turn, that's worth 210 points sometimes, you know?
If you're taking a 200 point unit out of the game, absolutely it is.
Absolutely.
You know, and it allows you to start staggering your approach, right?
Hmm.
It's really hard to stop someone, who drops three 10-man bricks, of jump pack Marines into your backfield. It's still hard, but it's not nearly as hard to do it against two, right? Then you move block, the next unit, or you put them in a position where that the last big unit is forced to fight them away from your deployment zone, and now you can start picking off the game turn by turn instead of just panicking on your first.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, well, you've played a couple of games against both Blood Angels and Chaos Space Marines, which, Chaos Space Marines are pretty assault-heavy army as well, even though they did take nerfs. In our next couple of slides, you have some pictures showing us, basically what to do in certain situations when, you're going up against these aggressive armies, and also how to position your units. So I kind of want to look at that really quick and talk about that if you can. Now, in this game, you're going against Chaos, right? Chaos Space Marines.
Yes, sir.
And it looks like from the positioning of the board, your opponent doesn't really have a lot of good choices. Can you kind of go into that a little bit and explain what your opponent is, really going up against in this game and what's going to happen in the next turn?
Yeah, so I know I play about 95% of my games are Harlequins, but this was an Eldari game. My goal was to see how good Fights First was with heroic intervention and put Osterman back on the board. I've loved Dire Avengers since like fourth edition. So any excuse I can use to play them, I will. But really, the whole goal of this is to just see how far and how impactful, Fights First was. So in this list, I had an Autarch Wayleaper with the Howling Banshee Mask. I had Yvrane's unit of Harlequin troops with the Vizarch for Fights First, and we had the Solitaire. And this game, we were using the Terraform rules. So I had Striking Scorpions up at the top. This is an example of how to create space, right? And make sure that your opponent doesn't just crash everything into you. So at the top, yeah, right there, we had Striking Scorpions, and they just go on to the objective to start terraforming. Now we forced our opponent to have to engage us there, right? And we moved our Warwalker up as well to get some shots into Venom Crawler and another kind of juicy target to force our opponent to that side of the board. So yeah, we did pretty good. We have another squad of Dark Reapers on the top to shoot into the bikes if they want to engage the Scorpion. This is how we make trades, right? So
Absolutely.
it's not too bad. And then they're going to have to do something, put another unit on there if they want to hold that objective afterwards. Now in the center, we put the Autarch Wayleaper up there. Right within range of Yvrane's unit, so she can heroically intervene with Fights First. Anything that wants to charge into her. If it's a Demon Prince, he's going to take a licking. If it's the Warp Talons on the bottom, they're going to take a whooping. And he's also going to terraform that center objective. So it's like, how many positions can we put our opponent in to just make difficult decisions? On the bottom, we put a Warwalker there, and then we put the Solitaire right there by Fights First to terraform there. So if our opponent wants to get on this objective and they want to, dig into the Warwalker, I'm going to intervene with the Solitaire. I could intervene with the Solitaire and wipe out, half a unit of Warp Talons, which is pretty good for us. This was back when they were able to just, fall out of combat and do whatever they wanted every single turn and keep coming back. So
Yeah.
I wanted to make that charge an awful, decision for them. So really, this is just a good example of how to get on points, how to spread your opponent's forces out, make them engage you wherever they need to, and give them no good options. They have no good charges here.
Right. Absolutely. And
So
that's what I think is clever about this. And playing Eldar in general is that we have a lot of very strong Fights First units. And if you play those units in your list, your opponent's going to have a really hard time figuring out what to charge. Right? Because normally the Autarch Wayleaper right here, juicy target. Out in the open, within charge range, an opponent would love to pick up this model. But there's a hard choice, because if they pick up this model, then you got your Vrain's unit that can just heroically intervene, kill that unit, and then consolidate on the objective. And guess what? When it's the Eldar player's turn, I'm going to get objective points. I'm going to get primary points for that, right? So you're
mhm.
forcing your opponent has to do something, but there's no good options, like you said.
Right. I mean, exact. So either I'm going to walk away with a whole bunch of primary, right, and
Yep.
terraformed objectives, or you have to sacrifice a good portion of your army. Uh, So, like on the bottom objective, right? Even if they go in with the bikers, if they go in with the demon prince and the warp talons, okay, that's fine. Let's say they kill the warwalker, they steal the objective from me. That's okay because I also have a squad of bikes and dire avengers and everything under the sun there to deal with those units
Yeah.
afterwards. So now we've taken out, the prince, the bikes, half a unit of warp talons, and I hold the objective. And all I have to do is keep the solitaire nearby, and the warp talons aren't going to be able to come back on the following turn. I control that side of the board, right?
Absolutely.
So, and we don't have to, sometimes we're talking about trading. It's not just throwing something on an objective for your opponent to kill. It's about making them expose a more expensive portion of their army to yours to get the job done. And if we can do that turn after turn, we're in such a good position. It's why I love Harlequins so much.
Absolutely, man. And yeah, Dark Eldar, Ynnari is doing very well right now as well in tournaments and stuff. Ynnari forces, with the Vivect ability that Archons get now, I don't think they FAQ'd that. But
It's just the Warlord.
okay, it's just the Warlord now. Got it.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that's a little unfortunate for the Ynnari, but it's still pretty good. I thought it was honestly broken the way it was written anyway, so I'm glad they actually changed that. But yeah, Ynnari can still, pretty much wreck face. Even without the Vect ability, they have tons of options and, fights first units like Lilith. I think you even get more fights first options available to you when you do run Ynnari. And
Yeah,
yeah,
you do.
Lilith is just so strong, dude. Like she just
She
wrecks
is
things.
she is out of this world. So one of the comparisons I did on my video is Lilith is essentially an 85 point solitaire. Now she can't, blitz across the board, but her damage is absurd. Into anything toughness 5 or less, she is on par with the solitaire. Into like lighter infantry, single wound, she does a lot more damage than the solitaire. But the solitaire ends up catching the edge into something like vehicles because he's actually strength 6, not an anti-infantry
Right.
profile weapon. So they're very, very good. If you imagine playing with 2 solitaires in a list, I would play with 2 solitaires in every single army if I had the option.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
just to keep my opponent honest. You want to,
Yeah.
throw in your salt intercessors with jump packs. You want to use legionnaires. You want to use whatever it is. That's fine. I'm going to be everywhere with the solitaire every turn.
Yeah. Yeah,
That would be broken though.
oh, yeah. Oh, super broken, man. 2 solitaires in an army. Well, what do you think about the new Mephiston that was revealed and his rules or his data
Oh, I don't
sheet?
know what his rules are.
Oh, he's pretty strong now. He's a lone operative now. He has Feel No Pain. I think Feel No Pain 5 plus, if not a 4 plus. I think a 5 plus though, if I'm not mistaken. 4 plus,
Four
yeah, it's
pluses,
a
yeah.
4 plus invul. It's a 5 plus Feel No Pain, and he has lone op, and he's very strong. Like he has some really strong combat and stuff like that. It's like Mephiston of the old days. Do you remember back in 5th edition how strong Mephiston was?
Yeah,
Yeah, he's like that now. Like he's
that's
tough.
killer.
Yeah, and I was thinking
That is
of,
killer.
oh, it's brutal, dude. I was thinking maybe Fire Dragons could take him out, which I think Fire Dragons just basically melt him still, but yeah, he's tough.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
tough.
Fire dragons melt a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, anything that's a character, fire dragons are doing some wild work into. I would hate to be like Gilliman, or like the lion just staring down fire dragons out of a falcon. I mean, the
Oh,
likelihood that you get burned your 300 point unit or more to like an 85 point unit of falcons or of fire dragons is not nice.
yeah, dude. It's
So
it's wildly bad for the Space Marine player. Yeah, absolutely.
can you like imagine? So we have you actually you're sparking some things in my mind right now. So we have Ynnari, right? You have
Hmm.
Lilith. Oh no, you can't charge out of a transport in Ynnari. I'm like, man, you can run Warp Spiders, the Incarn, the Solitaire, and Lilith, and anything else, and pretty much just alpha, your opponent with fights first. I mean, everywhere across the
Absolutely.
board. Even
Well,
if you didn't want to hit them on turn 1, you
right.
can move everyone up. Then they all have fights first, right? They can all protect
Yep.
your other units that are screening them. And then on the following turn, you just, dive into your entire opponent's deployment zone,
Well,
and you could
absolutely.
probably do some work.
Well, and now apparently with the new FAQ as well, there's nothing stopping you from, say, deploying a raider long ways, pointed towards your opponent's deployment zone, and then still being behind line of sight because the actual base of the vehicle is behind the terrain.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you could literally just have it there, get an extra 3 inches for your unit to, pop out on the other end of the ruin and then charge. Move and
Yeah,
charge.
when they all have deep strike too. The
Oh yeah.
raiders and the venoms and everything, so they don't even have to come in on the board edge.
I know, isn't that crazy? That's
That whole
nuts.
army has deep strike. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much all their vehicles. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's nasty. Like they can do some serious work.
Yeah. And those are the kind of decisions though that make the game like fun, right? Like your opponent knows you can only heroically intervene with, one unit in a turn.
Right.
But unless you have actually Jane Czar, can she do it even if another unit
Yes.
has as well, or can she just do it for free?
She can do it for free and if another unit has done it as well in the same phase. So she has to use it second to be able to do that. You can't like reverse it
Yeah,
around, but yeah, technically you
they can
can.
just go around that.
Right.
Yeah. You just charge that unit first.
Correct.
Um, so okay. That's not bad though, right? They know that they can charge all of your stuff, but it's like which one of their units do they want to lose? And then you can, if you have the CP, you can interrupt again. And now like any charge into your army, it's like you split it up,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So man, that's not bad. That's not bad. That's
It's
kind of what I was going for in this list on the screen right now.
yeah,
I was thinking Jane Czar, but unfortunately the Banshees just didn't
make
they
it
didn't
in.
make the cut in this one.
Yeah.
Um,
I think Jane
but
Czar by herself is pretty strong. Like she's a pretty strong character. She's fairly durable. I think I prefer the solitaire for the extra points. But,
mm,
I mean you have a Zerman in this list. So that's good. He overwatches twice. He can overwatch twice. So you can overwatch with those nice jet bikes there and a Zerman's unit.
that's why they hang out together.
Yep.
So, I don't want to give my opponent the choice, right? To go in front of the Dire Avengers first. I want that whole thing to be able to overwatch, whatever happens. So
Oh, that's brutal. Like those warp talons would just disappear in a second.
yeah, they're just gone. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's like
I mean, realistically, you didn't really give your opponent many, like, I would say zero good options here. I mean, there's just nothing he can do. If he moves the Warp Talons up here to charge the Autarch, he's getting Overwatch twice. If he moves them over here, he's getting Fight first with the Solitaire and then dead afterward because, of course, you have all the jet bikes and the Dire Avengers back there. There's just not a lot of good options for your opponent. So that's kind of bummer.
no. Yeah, he actually had there's two squads of warp talons in this list, two 10-man bricks, and then there's
Mm-hmm.
another unit of like 10-man terminators, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the strategy as well though is pushing up everywhere on the board, right? So we're screened everywhere and it's turn 1, right? There's no really beneficial place he can put, his unit of terminators, maybe behind the rune by the impulsor
Mm-hmm.
up front, or he's putting them back by his home field objective. And that sucks because they're going to have to walk across the board the entire game. They have nothing to interact with. So now, we can kind of force them into a different situation as well. So,
Right.
this strategy isn't like foolproof. I believe the turn after this, the Warp Talons came in and then killed the Dark Reapers
Mm-hmm.
on his next turn, which I mean is fine and great. It's nothing, right? He ended up getting a few units with the Warp Talons this game, but overall, I don't think they made up their points.
Right.
They never had a good place to be. So,
Yeah, that's true. Dark Reapers are not that expensive. So,
yeah, I don't care about those guys.
yeah.
you know,
Well, it's like when Chaos Space Marine players were running the big bricks of 10 Warp Talons, I really didn't understand that because I was like any target that they would want to kill and then, disappear and go back into reserve is going to be a small unit like, 5 Space Marines or, 5 Dark Reapers or, something like that a 5-man could take care of, you know. So, because they have no
exactly.
range weapons either. I mean, they're just pure claws and pure hate, and that's all they have.
It's just hate. There's just so much hate.
They hate
But
life, man. They're like the internet redditors who are just raging at everybody. Honestly,
yeah,
when I look at those models, actually, I really like the Warp Talon models. I know they're a little old. I know Chaos Space Marine players kind of complain about them a little bit, but I think they're cool. And you know, Chaos Space Marine players don't complain. We have Warp Spiders.
I was gonna say it, man. We've got like 40-year-old warp spiders. How
Man,
ridiculous.
I'm really looking forward to the new sculpts for those. They're going to be awesome.
Oh yeah.
I'll definitely
Yeah,
pick
for
those up.
sure.
Okay, so moving on to your kind of next game. This is more of your traditional Harlequin based list, right? With Yvraine, and I kind of consider Yvraine a Harlequin at heart. So,
I do too.
you
I
know,
do too.
she kind of is. I mean, wasn't she a Harlequin at one point, or am I wrong on that? In the lore,
She was something. She might have been a witch.
she's been around. Let me tell you, she's been around the block a couple
She's
times, man.
she's
Like,
been around. I've seen her outfit.
yeah.
No, don't.
Oh man, yeah, she's funny.
You
She's
can cut that out.
interesting. Oh, it's staying in, my friend. It's staying.
Oh snap.
Yeah, but
Oh,
so here's another example of putting your opponent into a really tricky position, right? In this game, you're going against Blood Angels actually, and that's a little bit of a different matchup, but kind of the same things, right? Forcing your opponent to fight where they don't want to fight. As you can see here, Exile has put units on 3 objectives in the center, and he's backed that up with units that can counterattack whatever he brings out. So remember that Blood Angels are more expensive than Aeldari. You can lose a Falcon, but whatever he has to use to kill the Falcon is going to be much more expensive. And again, look, I think 2 or 3 D cannons, right? Or just
two
two,
D cannons, a
two D
death
cannons.
jester, and a falcon.
Yeah, you
All
got the
right
death.
there.
Oh yeah, Death Jesty is gonna just go to town as well on 2 models, right? So you got some really good backup for whatever comes out and kills these units, and then you've kind of won the game at that point. I feel, especially in the game I played against Blood Angels, it was very much I was able to outtrade his units, and the units that he did have to bring to bear couldn't trade up, and then that was basically it. You know.
That's it. This is turn one of the game, and my opponent used a very kind of tried and true traditional deployment style. He had a unit of Death Company right behind the center rune. He had an impulsor filled with Blade Guard vets. He had scouts up by the top objective by the Skyweavers. I believe they were in that rune. And then he had a big unit of Vanguard vets with jump packs and sanguinary priests. So they had 4 up invulns and 5 up no pains with like I think it's like 40 attacks or something crazy on the charge or 50 attacks. It was ridiculous. And then behind that, there was an impulsor with Blade Guard vets, and then another unit of Death Company Marines with jump packs were in reserve, 10.
Right.
And I think Lamarty's, no, I don't think Lamarty's was with that one. I think it had Chaplain. So my goal is to just not let all of this get to me at once. So when we talk about like creating space and dictating the fight, you'll see like up at the top, we put the Skyweavers there. The goal is to just make my opponent dedicate something to that side of the board. It doesn't matter what it is. I want to put a unit that's durable enough to not just fall to like middling small arms fire, but something a little bit durable enough to force him to do something. So now I don't have to worry about like Blade Guard and Death Company and Vanguard Marines and another squad of Blade Guard. No. So let's take out one at a time. We sacrifice some units. Now my favorite thing in this game is I pushed up the Falcon to the mid board, and this gave my opponent like no good options for what to do with his Death Company. On the first turn, we end up moving up our D cannons. We end up killing 4 of the Death Company Marines. So now they're -1 to hit. So on our opponent's turn, if he wants to, clap back, he has one option, right, to deal with this Falcon or me holding the center objective. And that's to attack it with the Death Company. But now they're hitting on 4s. Okay, even if they get full rerolls, there's only 6 guys Okay. And then they're wounding on fives. And he's going to have to wound, I believe, with three or four of them and then max the damage in order to take out the Falcon.
Yep.
So he's going to have to bring it down in combat. And if he does not bring out the Falcon, right, bring it down in combat, my troops will just get out the next turn and charge his Death Company.
Right.
And the Falcon will move into position and kill the Death Company. So it's like, without doing anything, all I had to do was move the Falcon into the middle of the board, and that squad of Death Company was like accounted for.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that was awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool when you can win the game based on just the movement phase, right? You don't even have to shoot. Right?
Yeah.
And the funny thing is yeah, the Death Company, I mean, they may be able to kill the Falcon. I don't know what detachment he was running, but they can probably pump some command points into it, but regardless, the Falcon dies, that's 140 points. That big block of 10 Death Company is 280 points.
Yeah.
That's
Plus Lamarty's.
Oh yeah, and
Right.
Lamarty's is in there too. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, so he's like what, 80 points, something like that. So it's like,
Something like that.
yeah, it's crazy. So like your opponent is spending way more resources killing your units than you have to kill his units with. Simple, right? So making effective trades is really important against these kind of assault style armies. It's not like a shooting army where, they can shoot you and like, possibly kill you and then you have to, fire something back at them. It's not really like that. It's they're going to expose themselves to you. And once they do expose themselves, you can of course, call the police and have them arrested. So, it's a
Yeah.
neat, it's that simple.
No, that, and really that's what it is. So like, if we look at this, the Blade Guard vets are going to take the Skyweavers down up top. They're going to hold that, objective. But then we have our D cannons who are within range of that to dig into the Blade Guard vets. Okay.
Yeah.
We have the Falcon up top as well. And then we have whatever the troops are going to do that are inside the Falcon in the middle to help deal with them on the back end. Now, when we clear that top objective, right, because we force them up there, he's got to bring down his other unit of Death Company Marines. But hopefully by that point, that unit is forced to just sit and hold an objective
Right.
for the rest of the game. And I'm fine giving up, the 5 points on that objective for primary every turn if I'm going to get, 10 or 15 or 10 more, than he is, or even 5 more for the remainder of the game. So it's just dictate the fight. We ended up using Yvraine's unit on the first turn. This angle on search and destroy is awesome. So they came down. We needed an 8-inch charge. The Vanguard vets were staged behind that ruin. We use a 6 on the fate dice. We get in on a 2+. We wipe out all but one of them. The Solitaire goes into and uses precision to bring down the Sanguinary Priest. They don't have CP to fight on death. So we wipe out, or we account for the Death Company squad in the middle. We account for the Blade Guard vets, and we account for the Vanguard vets. And then the turn after, when he wants to get the Blade Guard veterans out of the Impulsor at the bottom, they have to charge into Yvraine's Fight First unit. And it's like, what do you do? Right?
And
We're not a hyper aggressive army, but
yeah. And that's really tough. I mean, even if the Blade Guard veterans go and smash in there, there's no guarantee that they're going to be able to kill your Vrain's unit. And then it's a
right.
wash.
And they do end up going into Yvraine's unit. They fight on death. They bring down all but like a couple troops in Yvraine and the Vizark, and then Yvraine and them move into like the Impulsor the next turn, and then they kill the scouts on the home field objective, and the Solitaire moves up as well. And then it's pretty much game over. We don't have to do anything for the rest of the game. We could just sit on points and claim secondary.
Absolutely. And, it's nice that your Vrain brings back Harlequins too.
He's so dirty.
It just revives
so
them,
dirty.
It's like, yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's kind of like, people don't expect that from Eldar. They're like, oh, apothecaries do that kind of stuff. And then like you do it and they're like, wait, what?
Mhm.
They're not ready
The
for
amount
it.
of times. Oh yeah, someone's brought her down to like the unit down to like one troop. It's like the lead player,
Yeah.
and then the following turn you bring back like 2 or 3, and they're all fusion pistol dudes. And then they shoot the life out of something, and then
Yep.
charge into something else. and then your opponent's like, well, what's going on? And then the next turn you bring back a couple more, and by the end of the game, it's like you have like 7 or 8 troops remaining, even though they almost wiped your squad. And you're just like sitting pretty, asking someone to come attack you.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
her shooting is bonkers,
Oh yeah,
by the
dude.
way.
Oh, it's so good. Her combat's good too. She's just all around good against infantry. Like she does
Mhm.
very good work with, devastating wounds and and anti-infantry 2 plus. It's just
Mhm.
I feel sorry for, whoever has to fight that, it's just so strong. And then the Visarch on top of that. You don't even need the 10 Harlequins usually to kill a large amount of infantry with the unit.
No, the Vizar kind of just does some work
He's
by
dirty.
himself.
Yeah.
He's and if you give him +1 to wound on the charge, like he gets from the Harlequin brick, um, he's like insane. I mean, he'll flip, I mean, rhinos and impulsors and stuff like that,
Absolutely.
by himself. So
Yeah, he's really
yeah.
strong. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean that's basically what it is, guys, is that, you can out trade, out position your opponent, you'll win the game, and it's a little harder to kind of get the hang of at first because there's a lot of apprehension about wanting to throw your units out there to die. A lot of Eldar players have this misconception that if I allow anything in my army to die, I'm going to lose. That may have been in past editions, but you got to learn how to trade with your units, right? Like the reality is that you're going to lose models. Your units are going to die, but as long as you can put them in a position to where the next turn you're going to kill more, or your opponent's going to, not trade as high for point for point, then you're in a good position and you're in a good spot to win the game. And I think that's why a lot of the, kind of like tried and true Wraith bricks and stuff like that, like may be having trouble at the local game store. It's because, hey, now there's units that can actually kill the Wraith brick pretty easily. I mean, 10 Death Company
Yeah.
charging into a Wraith brick, the Wraith brick is going to be a Wraith rubble, basically.
It's true.
It's
Anything, yeah, anything getting charged by 10 Death Company is gone.
yeah.
That unit wipes out. I'm pretty sure everything in the game. I don't think Magnus walks out of that.
Oh yeah, he doesn't.
So
He doesn't. Magnus is toast if he walks into that. Oh god. Yeah, they'll just destroy. They're super good against big Death Stars like that. So that's kind of why I've kind of walked back a little bit from the Death Stars because they're a lot of points. Wraith Brick's going to cost you about 500 points when it's all said and done. With the Spirits here and the Farseer with Fortune and all that stuff, it's just not going to help against these really hyper aggressive lists. So I've kind of steered more towards, Falcons, Fire Dragons, Harlequins, Striking Scorpions, stuff like that, because they just do so well at the trading game, and I think that's really where the Eldar strengths lie now in Pariah Nexus.
yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree 100%. I'm shocked that we're not seeing more Falcons than we are. Just because there's such good, I mean, transport options on top of, relative shooting. Like Carandrius and Scorpions getting out of one of them is really good. Um, any of the Phoenix Lords getting out of them are really damn good. The Harlequin troop getting out is just shockingly good, and then you have a really good platform afterwards. So like, I don't know why we're not seeing more of them, especially on like the GW terrain layouts.
Mm-hmm.
2 seems like a really good spot to be, for most lists and most armies, but I just don't think enough of the highly competitive scene has picked them up yet. I think
Yeah.
I don't know what it is specifically, but I've been playing against some hyper competitive lists. I've been playing against some really good players, and Falcons have yet to let me down. They've done what I've needed them to do every single game. So
Yeah.
I don't know what the apprehension is.
I
It's
I honestly think it's just that, like what I said in the beginning of the video, people are s- kind of attached to the style and build that they've been running since the beginning, you know?
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, not without the Wraith Knight, of course, because they made that unusable pretty much in competitive play. But you know,
Mm.
besides that, I mean, you see some of the same stuff. You see the Eldar Monster Mash with Yinkarn, Avatar, Skothak Wraith Knight, and some of the other kind of big stuff with maybe some Warp Spider units and stuff like that. But you're seeing that a lot because that's a tried and true tournament list that has won tournaments before, and people are, I think, not prepared to move away from that and completely change their build, you know?
Mm.
And we've seen some
I agree.
aspect kind of lists as well, but again, those have some things from this style of list that we see here on the screen, but they don't have all the elements, right? Like they might have the Yvrain brick, but maybe they're not going to take Falcons or D cannons, you know?
Right.
So, and
Right.
I think
I
Falcons are so good.
I do. I think they're so good. There's someone on the Eldari like Facebook group. I think you had him on your channel for the breast cancer awareness.
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, he's on all the posts. He's got a beautiful army. It's painted up like my Mira. It looks just incredible. He plays some different lists. Like he was using like lynxes and some other stuff. But like a lot of bikes. And running it to like really good success. Really good placements. It's the out of the box thinking that I think makes the game more fun. And fortunate for us as Eldar, we have the option to just really do whatever we want. I think people get too caught up on the specifics and like the hyper efficiencies of each of these units. But you know, at the end of the day, um, GW has balanced most units pretty close to each other, right? We're all, you know, most infantry is strength 4, -1, 1 damage. You know, if it's like a 75 to 100 point unit, that's our typical melee. Whether it's Harlequin troops or assault intercessors or jump pack intercessors, or you know whatever else it may be, we're all shooting pretty much the same profiles. We're all attacking pretty much the same way. So it's the abilities that we have that make the game fun. And Eldar has so many abilities. Like, let's use them. That's I guess my thought.
Yeah, a lot of synergies, you know? Like I really love Shroud Runners and Wind Riders. Like they're my bread and butter and they haven't let me down, you know? Like and I think once people start realizing that yeah, we're in a, you know, marine meta, we're in a very, you know, kind of toughness 4, 2 wound or, you know, more with, you know, assault units, things like Thunderwolf cavalry and stuff. I think we'll see people kind of adapt and move away from maybe some of the more traditional, you know, lists that we've been seeing in competitive play, and that'll probably bring the Eldar win rate up a little bit. And I also
I
think
think
just,
so.
you know, in general, you know, people going to tournaments playing the Eldar, there's not many of us, you know? It's very, very small amounts. And the only reason it's larger than some of the other factions is because we have been dominant for most of the edition,
And we're
right?
one of the oldest. We're
Yeah,
one of the oldest armies. You know, there's people who just got Eldari armies from, you know, like 20 years ago, and all the units are the same. Like I have 30 metal striking scorpions and like 20 metal howling banshees. Um, like we just got those units, and you throw them on a new base, and you're still playing the game the same as it was 20 years ago. I mean, warp spiders are literally the exact same. Half the Phoenix Lords are exactly the same. So everyone's got them. Um,
yeah,
it's just we got to bring them out.
absolutely.
So
And I think we will. I think, you know, we're unfortunately probably going to be the last, one of the last codexes. And I think that's mostly due to, you know, now that I really think about it, the release schedule for, you know, new models probably going to be at the very end of the edition, man. Like
they could have,
you know,
oh, yep, they could have saved themselves so many headaches if they would have just released Eldari's Index or Codex sooner instead of nerfing the same detachment like 8 times throughout the year. Just give us a Codex
absolutely.
and figure it out. I truly believe that the Sky Splinter Assault, a good chunk of those rules or the design of them was meant to be a Harlequin detachment.
Oh, for sure.
Um, I mean,
Absolutely.
if you look at it and what it does, I mean, I think some things were changed, like you know, giving their guys lance. Our Harlequin troop already have that, but yeah, I mean, it just makes too much sense. Like that could have been a really good, you know, detachment for something like Harlequins, but
Absolutely.
just like, it's upsetting that we're going to be one of the last indexes. Everything else now is like It's all part of the Imperium, and then Eldari and Votan, and maybe is that it? Is Eldari and Votan, and then a bunch of Imperium stuff? Like, are we joking right now? Imperial agents got a codex
I know before the
before Eldari did?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, it's weird, man. Like the funny thing to me is that, I always go back to, I think that when a company releases rules for their armies and stuff, everything should be equal, right? You should treat no faction better than everything else. Everything should be equal no matter what the sales are, right? Because that promotes diversity and that promotes people buying other stuff than just the stuff they're already buying or may not even need anymore, right? So you release all the codexes at the same time. And then if you wanted to add things to those codexes, you could add things equally for all factions. And that's what, you know what? I don't know where they are as a company now, but Privateer Press and War Machine, that's how they did it during, Mark II when I used to play War Machine and Hordes. And it worked
mhm,
so well because everything would come out at the same time, everything would be relatively balanced, and if it wasn't, they would kind of balance it later, right? But
yeah.
everybody had access to new models, new rules, all at the same time. And that's how I think they should do it
Yeah, but
going
then they
forward.
then they don't have the option to like put
Gouge you.
out an army with rules that are broken so that
Right.
everyone goes out and buys the models to be broken and then nerf them, 2 months later
Right, of
on
course.
purpose.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah, I know
it's
they don't have that option, right? But the funny thing is they could always come up with expansions, and they could add new units to every army or new rules to every army, and then some armies could be, really those new rules could be really strong, which require people to build or buy more stuff. So I mean, there's ways to like get those people still and make
yeah,
everybody
for
happy.
sure.
But yeah, I
For
totally
sure.
agree. The codex creep thing is very much very much real, you know. Like most of the codexes that have come out like fairly recently have been broken upon release only to be nerfed severely.
Right. Like
Like,
Custodes, I mean, that one was bad. Like not in a good way.
right.
Like that was a horrible that was a horrible codex.
It was
It's
terrible, dude.
still horrible. Like I don't know who wrote it, but that was rough. And I hate to like sling dirt on GW because I love this game. I love the hobby. I love the community. I don't mean to, but that was a bad codex. AdMech was a bad codex.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure, dude.
and this coming from the guy playing Harlequins.
Yeah.
Like I didn't even get a codex. Like they stole my whole army. And Custodes was, I feel like, in worse shape than we were.
Yeah, it was pretty sad to see them so bad, but I think a lot of players were kind of relieved because Custodes are one of those like armies that are really hard to fight if you're newer to the game. They're hard to play
Mhm.
against. And like a lot of people were like, "Oh, they lost the 4 plus, you know, feel no pain to devastating wounds. Thank goodness we can finally kill these guys." But the funny part
Mhm.
about that is they got nerfed so hard they got nerfed to the bottom, literally.
Yeah, well, they were a great introductory
Yeah.
army.
Oh, for
Like
sure.
I got a couple games in with a buddy of mine who I used to play Warhammer with all the time. He still has like this huge Necrons army. He's like 3 monoliths, just crazy stuff. And I was like, just play a game with me, like see if you like it again. And we gave him Custodes, and he was like, everything hits on a 2+. I'm like, yeah. And he was like, and they're strength 7 on the attack. I'm like, yeah. How many attacks do they get? 5. He's like, they're 3 wounds. They get invulnerables, and I'm like, yeah. And you get this like feel no pain 4+ once a game. He was like, what is this game turned into? Like they were so good that like a brand new player coming in,
Yep.
last time he played was like 4th or 5th edition, was like, this is broken
Of course. Yeah.
with without anything else, like knew that was bad.
You know what they are
So
basically, man, is like for a long time, Space Marine players were like begging GW to come out with quote unquote movie Marines as an official army, and they basically did that. you know
ah,
like realistic space marines with like 3 wounds apiece and hit on twos and like just what you would expect a space marine to be like in the lore. And yeah, they
mm,
came out with that. It's called Custodes. Like pick up the army. You have like a very small army, but everything like is really hard to kill, really deadly, and just have at it you know
yeah. I remember I was a kid and I watched like the first Warhammer movie that ever came out. I don't know if you ever saw this, but it was a bunch of it was like Catachan jungle fighters, and they were hunting down like a striking scorpion in the woods.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, it was what's the name of that movie? A Predator. It was Predator. No, I'm just joking. That's a horrible joke, but
Hey man,
that should have been the first Warhammer movie ever.
I bet
Um,
you anything it was based on that. The Catachans are definitely based on Rambo, kind of, like, Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, like the Predator movie, like definitely. And Striking Scorpions are definitely like were later in 4th edition 2006 inspired off of the Predators for sure.
that's
No doubt about it.
see.
Yeah.
Warhammer the movie,
Yep.
number one. It was Predator.
Stick around, everybody.
That was the worst dad joke I've ever told. Thanks for sticking with me on that one,
You're
man.
welcome. You're welcome. I'm right there with you, man. Oh man, yeah, that's funny. But yeah, I mean, you know what's funny is I actually had Catachans as one of my first the first box set of models I ever purchased was Catachans. And I remember my buddies talked me into it. I wanted Eldar. I was like, I want these guys. And my buddies were like, no, don't pick up those guys, man. They used a derogatory term for the Eldar, the space elves back then. They said, pick up these guys. They're real men. And I was like, okay. And like I picked up the Catachans instead, and like I just did not have fun with Imperial Guard my first couple years playing the game.
No, I had Tau. Tau was my first army that I ever had. And I thought they were going to be real cool, like Gundams and all this stuff. That's how the game was like sold to me. And then because that's when I started playing was right when Tau was coming out. So that was
Yep.
fourth. Yeah,
Yep.
that was fourth. And I was like, this is going to be cool. And I thought they were amazing. And we were playing on like these huge 6x4 tables without terrain. And I was just shooting everyone before they can run across the board at me.
Yep.
And then I played in a tournament on a normal board size with terrain and objectives. And I was like, oh, this army is garbage. Um, and I
Yep.
ended up trading it to my buddy for Eldari, and I've been with them ever since. So
That's a
it was cool.
fantastic choice. Fantastic
That was
choice.
another stupid army that got a codex before Harlequins. Was
Tau?
Kroot.
Oh,
Kroot,
Kroot. That's right.
Kroot got a detachment before Harlequins. Like Emperor's Children got a detach. Like, come on,
Yeah, that was ridiculous. Dude,
please.
like, trust me, I'm right there with you. All these new, like, detachments and stuff coming out, I'm so, like, salty about it because it's like, hello, we're like the third or maybe even the biggest Xenos faction now in the game, and we're one of the last to get attention. Come
Like,
on.
we're gonna play half an edition without Biltan or Samhain or Iandin. Like, are we really gonna do that? We're Eldari. It's all about the craft worlds and the different like aspects and all of these different. It's all about the different craft worlds,
Yep,
right? We don't get
absolutely.
any craft worlds as craft world Eldar.
I
Like,
know.
oh
We need that. We desperately need new rules. Like we need new detachments. I'm hoping GW, like for the remainder of the factions that are out, like gives us another detachment to work with. Like, come on, they gave Dark Eldar another detachment, and they didn't give like anything else another detachment. Come on, you know?
yeah, yeah. I mean, good on them for fixing Druhkari. They were
Yes.
they were bad, but
Oh, they were awful,
like,
terrible.
but give me something else.
Yeah, absolutely
But
agree. I mean, arguably the Dark Eldar are still pretty bad. It's just the actual detachment bonuses and stuff like really make up like in a big way. Like they
yeah,
make
the
the army
detachment
good.
bonus. Yes, it does. It Lance and ignores cover
Yeah.
make that detachment functional, right? Like
Absolutely.
Incubi suck without Lance.
Yeah,
Um,
they're not
let's
good.
let's be honest. If they're wounding things on fives, they're not doing that much work.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, they're still getting re-rolls and all of that, but they're only 3 attacks apiece. It's the Lance that makes it silly. Same thing with Harlequins though. It's the +1 to wound that makes them silly. But
Yeah. Very
yeah,
true. Very true.
that-
Wow, we need a new book, man. Here's, pray to Isha, pray to Sigorak. Give us a new Eldari Codex to work with. Give us something, you know?
that
Jeez.
that's it.
Well, hopefully we get it. But hey, man, I'll go ahead and let you go because I know you have stuff to do, kids to be with, and so forth. So I'll let you go. And, thanks for coming on. it's been a pleasure as always talking to you. And do you have any last words for the viewers out there who are thinking of picking up Harlequins?
You know what? They're fun. I will go as far as to say, here's my hot take of the year. Harlequins are just as good, if not better, than Druhkari right now, if we just take some cues from them. But if you find yourself doing really well with Druhkari, or you like that play style, small MSU, scoring, secondaries, move blocking, screening, that type of play style, Harlequins are really, really fun right now. So bring them off the shelves. I look forward to hearing from anyone in the comment sections or on my channel or in the Proxy Discord. You guys are awesome. I always enjoy talking to you. I feel like I ramble on a little bit too much, but thanks again for having me, man. It was a great time.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for joining us. And thank you so much to all the supporters and, generous people who have supported the channel over the last almost 2 years now, if you can believe that the channel's been up. Your help has greatly been appreciated. And of course, if you do want to join the Discord and join our, kind of Patreon, I do have free trials activated for that. So you don't have to pay a dime to join our Discord. I will leave the link in the description. And lastly, I do have a channel store page and also am an Amazon affiliate. So if you want to grab some discounted Eldar minis on Amazon or want to grab some apparel from the channel store page, I'll leave those links in there as well. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today. Thank you again, Exile, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.